Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well today. This time we are going to be looking at the launch titles of the Sega Game Gear. This is a really fun handheld. I mentioned this before, everyone on my block was basically a Sega person. Like everybody had a Genesis for the most part. Everyone had the Game Gear as well. There weren't a whole lot of Nintendo consoles on my block. We all had the NES, but after that, it kind of changed over to Sega Genesis and whatnot. So in 1991, the US got the Sega Game Gear, and it was a really cool console. It had 6 launch titles: Columns, Psychic World, Super Monaco GP, g-loc, Castle of Illusion, and the weird one to me was Revenge of Drakon. I'm going to talk about that later on, because that one I don't know why they called it that, to be honest. I've read a little bit about the launch, especially in Console Wars. It wasn't talked about a whole lot in there, though. So the first title that they had, or at least the pack-in title, was Columns. And this is a pretty fun game. I guess it was supposed to be their answer to Tetris, but it's more of a match 3 than anything else. It's not really going to be the same as Tetris. I don't know. It's a fun game for what it is. I never really played it when it came out, and I didn't know anyone who owned it until much later. It's a very fun puzzle game, but it wasn't going to help them compete with Tetris. It also didn't really take advantage of, honestly, the Game Gear's hardware. Our second one, Psychic World, that kind of did. You can see there's a lot more going on in this one than you would see in most Game Boy games or something like that. It's very bright, very colorful. That's something that the Game Gear had over the Game Boy. It had a full color screen. That also almost doubled the price of it, or at least made it double the price of the Game Boy for the most part. And yeah, this is a fun game. It's kind of like a Metroid style game and whatnot. And it kind of looks like a game that you would see on the Master System. And there's a good reason for that, because this had hardware that was close to the Master System. It wasn't exactly the same hardware. There apparently were a few differences that I don't want to get into too much. But the hardware was very close. And in fact, you could get an adapter to let you play Master System games on the Game Gear. Psychic World is really the one that I'm going to probably spend the most time with, because this was the most interesting one to me. I wish they had done more with it, because it's just kind of a cool idea for a game. It's a little bit like a Mega Man style game, and it's a lot of fun. You're this little side-scrolling person. You have some crazy powers and whatnot that I couldn't quite figure out how to work very well. Mostly because I was really bad at this. Really bad. But it's a bright, colorful game. It's got some really unique enemy designs. I was really digging the enemies in this. I thought they looked pretty creative. They looked pretty cool. This opening cutscene is also really amazing. There wasn't anything super crazy about the plot. You're just trying to stop an evil person from taking over the world. Nothing really special going on with that. But overall, the game was pretty fun to play. I only got to one part where I was a little bit confused by it. This also suffers from a couple of problems. You have 2 speeds. It's like this slow trot, and then immediately goes into a sprint, and it makes it kind of hard to move around. Also, you got kind of a small screen, so stuff just kind of appears on you. You don't really have a whole lot of time to react. And I also didn't really think the jumping mechanics were as good as they probably could have been. If I could have gotten one other game to actually work on this, and if I could have tracked it down, this one probably would not have been my favorite, but it really was. Then we get to Super Monaco GP. I'm gonna level with you guys. I hate racing games, and this one was kind of a challenge. I don't like this style of racing game to begin with, and on the Game Gear screen, it was really rough. I'm gonna let you know another thing. I wasn't playing this on an actual Game Gear. I was playing it on a Retron 5 with its adapter on it, which works great. It just kind of made a few of the games a little bit harder to kind of deal with at some point. Mostly because I really just did not like the controller, and also I don't like racing games. This game looks really good, though. I mean, it's bright, it's colorful, it's got a lot going on with it. So now we come up to the one that just absolutely confused me as to why it was called Revenge of Drakan. It's Adventure Island. Or, I'm sorry, it's Wonder Boy, which is also Adventure Island. God, this thing is weird. So let me talk a little bit about this again, because I mentioned it in a previous video. But the way this worked out was both games were made at the same time, both Wonder Boy and Adventure Island, and I think it was Sega, or at least another company that was working with them. They got control of the IP for Wonder Boy, and then Hudson retained the code. So you have one company that has the code for the game, the other company that has the IP. That's why you see Wonder Boy go in a different direction, and it's no longer the same thing as what Adventure Island was. And then Hudson takes Adventure Island, and they do, obviously, what they did with it, and made it really great. I wasn't really sure why they changed the name. Maybe it was to kind of hide the fact that it was basically Wonder Boy. I don't really know. It was very strange to me. So here's kind of a comparison so you can see what I'm talking about. You've got Adventure Island on the left and Wonder Boy on the right. Yeah, they're going to look very different, but you're finding the same things. You're picking up your stone axe, you're fighting snails, you're collecting fruit. And yeah, it's kind of the same game for the most part. Like, there are very minor differences in it. Yeah, it's just very strange to me. If I had been able to find this game on the Game Gear, it probably would have looked a little bit different, but not much. I was playing it on the Master System, so yeah, it's probably going to look a little bit different. Overall, these games are pretty good. Unfortunately, the Game Gear just had a lot of problems going for it. It sucked up a lot of batteries. It had to deal with the fact that the Game Boy was just as much fun to play, if not a little bit more. It was cheaper. And yeah, it's a shame that it didn't do as well as it could have. All of my memories of playing the Game Gear were on like road trips, going out to my friend's cabin on the lake. Never remember playing any of these games. We always played, there was a Ren and Stimpy game for it, which I don't have. I don't have a lot of Game Gear games, but we always played that Ren and Stimpy game. And yeah, I have a lot of fond memories of playing this. Just never really playing it when it was out, or at least never owning it when it was out. And that kind of leads us to one of the weird facts about the Game Gear, and kind of one of the weirder facts about Sega in general. So the Game Gear got discontinued in 1997, and the Sega Genesis was discontinued around the same time as well. Later, in 2000, Majesco picked up the license for the Game Gear, and they were allowed to actually release the Game Gear again. So that's when I picked it up, was in late 2000, and that really just had to do with me wanting to collect a whole bunch of stuff. Majesco had also put out the Genesis Mark III as well. So you saw Sega hardware that was kind of obsolete at the time, or at least dated at the time, getting like this renewed look from a Majesco license. That's kind of fun. It's just sort of weird. I remember my friend telling me this, like, oh gosh. Yeah, it had to be near the end of 2000. And he was telling me about how Toys R Us was selling the Game Gear. And I was kind of like, that's weird. And I go there and it wasn't even in like a display. They just kind of had it in like one of those bargain bins in the middle of an aisle. And it was all well organized and everything. It didn't look like anybody had just picked through it, and it didn't look like anybody had just like dumped all the stuff in there. But it was still kind of cool to see all that stuff and, you know, pick up a few of those games and at least play the Game Gear for a while before I kind of got bored with it because I wasn't really doing too much with handhelds at the time. So that's going to wrap things up, guys. I don't really have much more to talk about. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you owned a Game Gear, what was your favorite game or something like that. Anyway, guys, have a great day. Talk to you all later, and yeah, sorry. I already messed that one up. Talk to you all later, guys. Bye.
If you were colorblind and had an IQ less than 12, then you wouldn't care which portable you had. Of course, you wouldn't care if you drank from the toilet either.